better to play piano by ear or to learn with sheet music? Let's get into it. There are a number of pros and cons for both of these styles of learning and for both of these approaches to music making. So let's dive into the pros and then break down the cons and then see where we land on this discussion. So pros of learning music from sheet music. You tend to be able to learn a lot more music. You tend to be able to absorb the music more quickly, to pick things up more quickly, because it's all there on the page. There's not so much, is it like this or is it like this? Did I really hear it correctly? And just based on the experience that I have seen working with students and with other musicians who sight read really well and who read music very well tend to be able to learn more music in the same amount of time. When you're learning with sheet music, you also have a better attention to detail because it's all written really clearly on the score what the composer wants from you. That's not to say you can't have that attention of detail playing by ear, but when it comes to practicing, you just have it there black and white right in front of you. Exactly what the dynamic markings are, exactly what the articulations are supposed to be. And you can find those things by listening to recordings also, but then you have to assume that the musician that you're listening to, that you're imitating by playing by ear, dedicated equal attention to those elements of the music. And so you're not really in direct contact with the composer anymore. You're in direct contact with a recording or a set of recordings from certain musicians, but it's not this direct communication with the composer. Playing from sheet music also allows you to approach learning a little bit more systematically. Again, you have it in black and white right in front of you, and then you can really easily break down the music in chunks and work on this section and that section and isolate parts and isolate hands. And for me, it just seems a bit more straightforward to do this sort of systematic practicing when we have sheet music to go off. So what are the pros of playing by ear? The biggest pro, I think, of playing by ear is that it's a very personal approach to music making. You are only in this music world. You're not just reading something from a piece of paper. You are already in this musical atmosphere. You're completely immersed in the sounds from the very beginning. And music, at the end of the day, is not about notes on a page or squiggly things, as my dad calls them, but it's about the sound. It should always be about the sound. And of course we have to learn the notes, we have to learn the rhythms, but the most important is this sound world that we're creating. There are studies that show that when we learn pieces by ear, we tend to memorize better and our memory is more reliable, and we tend to retain the music for longer. So notice, when we're playing from music, we're able to pick things up more quickly, but retention is higher when we're able to play by ear. Another clear pro of learning music by ear is that you're a lot less likely to be derailed by mistakes, by accidents, right? If you play a wrong note and you've only ever played from the music, then we tend to get stiff and we tend to freak out and, oh no, but that wasn't according to plan, and what do I do now? And when you learn to play by ear, you're able to react a lot more organically to things like that, because everybody plays wrong notes. The most famous concert pianists in the world play wrong notes. It's not like anybody ever goes through life without ever playing a single wrong note. So we do need to be able to react to that and to move forward without posting a billboard that was a wrong note and everything fell apart and now we have to start over. That is a skill that you're able to develop a lot more organically when you're able to play by ear, because you're used to existing in this sound world and it doesn't always have to be exactly like black and white is written on the page. And if it's not, what do we do? I said there are pros and cons of each, so what are the cons? The cons of only ever playing for music is that what happens if you sit down at the piano and you don't have sheet music and you haven't memorized your piece yet? You can't do anything, right? It's a really frustrating experience because you sit down at the piano and you just feel completely incapacitated. You don't have the piece of paper in front of you that you always have, and you just can't do anything. And who would say that they speak Spanish if they can never have a conversation with someone without seeing everything written out on a piece of paper? It's hard to say you speak a language if you can't communicate in that language without seeing a written word. And so we want to develop that same sort of fluency in our musicality, because I like comparing music to a language. I think music is a language. And if we're never able to do anything without reading it from a piece of paper, we're not quite fluent in the language yet. Another con of playing with sheet music that I mentioned in the pros of playing by ear is that when we play by ear, we're not able to consume as much music and we're not able to learn as much music in the same amount of time. Necessarily, there are exceptions to everything. But when we only learn with sheet music, we do tend to forget the music much more quickly than if we learned it from a sort of oral experience. Another issue with learning music from sheet music is that it does have a sort of higher barrier for entry. It's difficult to play certain things from written music that if you're completely depending on reading note for note all the way through, that there are certain things that you probably could learn more quickly as a beginner. Once you've developed your reading skills and you've really mastered a certain level of reading, then you're able to learn things much more quickly. But getting to that point takes longer than sitting down at the piano and just kind of tinkering around with things and learning them by ear. And finally, and perhaps the most important con of learning just with sheet music, is that it can tend towards the kind of dry academic side. When we're only reading from a piece of paper, imagine going to the theater and only seeing people performing with the text in front of them. It can be less expressive. We have to work a little bit harder to let go of the sheet music and to really immerse ourselves in this world of music and start creating the emotional content that goes along with the notes on the page. What about the cons of playing by ear? So on the one hand, like I mentioned before, when we have sheet music, we have really clearly every single element that a composer wants us to execute. When we're learning by ear, we tend to be playing very musically, but we don't necessarily have a clarity surrounding these sort of really fine details, which also play into the emotional aspects of a piece and the expressive aspects of a piece. And so even if you prefer to learn by ear, I would encourage you to work through the music a little bit with the score so that you at least know what the composer wants in different parts of the piece for certain elements regarding dynamics, articulation, tempo changes, stretching, just any sort of indication that the composer put in the music. Again, you can pick it up from a recording, but it's not this direct communication with the composer. It's so cool that we have these scores that were written hundreds of years ago in many cases, but it's really like a direct form of communication with the composers. The final con of playing just by ear is that you're maybe not going to be able to learn the same quantity of music. You don't have the option of just sitting down and sight reading through things. You can listen to a recording and then imitate it, but it's probably going to take you longer to absorb all of the elements of that piece and to really reach a level where you would feel comfortable with the piece. Again, there are exceptions to everything, but in general, those tend to be the pros and cons. So what's the solution? There are pros and cons to both. I would really encourage you to be working on both of these skills. Work consciously on improving your reading skills, and if playing by ear seems scary to you or seems too difficult, just start really small. Start out with children's songs or songs that you hear on the radio, or find the chord progression for a song and you can use the chord progression and try to pick out the melody with your right hand. Things like that. You'll notice that you find it a lot quicker than you think you might. If you approach playing the piano with only one of these two skills, so only reading sheet music or only playing by ear, you're probably going to notice some gaps in your abilities. You're not going to be able to do certain things only by reading sheet music, and you're not going to be able to do certain things only playing by ear. But if you work on developing both of these skills, then you're going to be so well-rounded and you're going to really feel at home at the piano and really feel at home within music in general, because you know how to live and function in this sound world, and you can sit down and just play something, even if it's not something that you've learned with a sheet of music before. And on the other hand, if you have something that you really want to learn fast and you want to sit down and just be able to play it, or you just want to sit down and be able to sight read, then you have that ability as well. I often hear students saying, yeah, I mean, I play piano, but I don't read music. And they discount their ability as a pianist. And don't do that to yourself. And the flip side is also true. If you only play with sheet music and you haven't learned how to play by ear yet, I wouldn't say can't play by ear, because anyone can learn these skills. It just means that you have things you can work on, but you're still a musician and you still have this love for music and you still love playing the piano, and that's really what matters. Learning these skills is the frosting, right? As long as you're able to sit down and play, whether it's with sheet music or by ear, you're playing the piano. You're doing the thing that you want to do. And you're just having both of these sets of skills is a bonus, and it's only going to support your learning journey. So let me know in the comments below, do you play mostly by ear? Do you play mostly with sheet music? Do you do a mixture? And what's the next thing you're going to work on regarding ear training or reading music? I'm really interested to hear your feedback, so drop that in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe, and maybe share it with someone who's also learning to play piano. Until next time, happy practicing.